I came home early from a business trip, expecting to surprise my wife with an anniversary gift. Instead, I walked into the biggest betrayal of my life. She thought she had me fooled. She thought I'd never find out. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make her and her lover lose everything. And by the time they realized what was happening, it was already too late. The city lights blurred outside the airplane window as the tires hit the tarmac. After weeks of negotiations, sleepless nights, and endless meetings, the deal was finally done. It had taken months of relentless effort, but it was worth it, another major victory for my career. Yet, as the plane taxied to the gate, none of that mattered. My thoughts weren't on contracts or business strategies. They were on the small velvet box inside my jacket pocket. The antique watch had caught my eye in a quiet shop in Kyoto. Its intricate design and timeless elegance reminded me of Emily, my wife of 10 years. I imagined the look on her face when I surprised her with it. She always loved meaningful gifts, and this one symbolized everything we had built together. Navigating through customs was routine. My passport was stamped, my bags passed inspection, and soon I was standing outside, inhaling the crisp evening air of New York. The exhaustion from the flight clung to me, but excitement pushed it aside. I wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow. Emily had no idea I was arriving early, and I couldn't wait to see her reaction. The cab ride through the city was agonizingly slow. Traffic had turned the streets into a gridlocked maze of red brake lights and honking horns. I leaned forward, asking the driver if there was another route, but he simply shrugged. Impatient, I drummed my fingers against my leg, feeling the weight of the watch pressing inside my pocket. After what felt like an eternity, my building finally came into view. The doorman greeted me with his usual nod, but I barely acknowledged him. I was already inside, moving swiftly toward the elevator, my mind focused on only one thing, seeing Emily. As the elevator ascended, I straightened my tie, ran a hand through my hair, and took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been looking forward to for weeks. The doors slid open, and I stepped into the hallway, moving quickly toward the front door. Carefully, I turned the key in the lock, easing the door open as quietly as possible. The scent of lavender candles drifted through the air, mixing with something else, faint music playing from the speakers in the living room. I hesitated for a second, listening. Everything felt normal, familiar. Still, I wanted to make my entrance special. Stepping inside, I let the door close softly behind me. My footsteps were muffled by the plush carpet as I made my way toward the bedroom. That was when I heard her voice. A soft laugh, warm and carefree, floated through the air. A sound I had heard countless times, one that usually filled me with happiness. But something was different. Then, another voice. A man's. Low, intimate. The words that followed shattered everything. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I know, she responded, her voice almost breathless. Mark is so predictable. With you, it feels different. The walls closed in. My grip tightened on the doorframe, my body frozen as my mind struggled to process what I was hearing. This wasn't possible. Not Emily. Not the woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with. A dull ringing filled my ears, drowning out the rest of the conversation. My pulse pounded, every beat hammering against my ribs. My fingers curled into fists as I fought against the urge to storm inside, to demand an explanation, to tear apart the illusion of the life I thought I had. Instead, I forced myself to move, stepping back slowly, retreating like a stranger in my own home. My breaths were shallow, my vision blurred, but somehow, I made it to my office. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing me inside a space that had once been my sanctuary. I sank into my chair, staring blankly at the darkened screen of my laptop. The room was silent except for the faint sound of their voices in the distance, murmuring secrets I never should have heard. My hand found the pocket of my jacket, closing around the velvet box. A bitter laugh escaped me as I pulled it out, flipping it open to reveal the watch. The gift that was supposed to be a symbol of love, of commitment, of 10 years together. Now, it felt like a cruel joke. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time lost all meaning as I sat there, trapped in a reality I never saw coming. By the time the house had fallen silent, and I heard the soft creak of the bed as she settled in for the night, something inside me shifted. I could have confronted her then. Could have walked into that bedroom, held up the evidence of her betrayal, and demanded the truth. But I didn't. Instead, I made a decision. One that would change everything. Morning light seeped through the curtains, casting long shadows across the bedroom. I hadn't slept. I had spent the entire night in my office, staring at the ceiling, reliving the moment over and over again. The quiet laughter, the whispered words, the undeniable truth. Emily had betrayed me. I heard her moving around in the kitchen, the soft clinking of coffee cups, the hum of a familiar morning routine. My routine. But today, everything was different. Today, I was no longer the man who had walked through that door expecting to surprise his wife. I forced myself to stand, to move, to play the role I needed to for now. Stepping into the kitchen, I found her exactly as I had imagined, dressed in a silk robe, hair tied up, coffee in one hand, scrolling through her phone with the other. She looked up, eyes widening in surprise. "You're home early." Her voice was light, cheerful, as if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't just spent the night with another man. I smiled. Forced. Hollow. The mask slipped into place. "Yeah. Flight got in late last night." She walked over, pressing a kiss to my cheek. The scent of her perfume mixed with something else, something that didn't belong to me. I didn't react. Not yet. She talked about work, about weekend plans, about the important marketing retreat she had coming up next week. A full 7 days away. A business trip, she claimed. I already knew the truth. She wouldn't be alone. Sipping my coffee, I nodded along, pretending to listen. Letting her believe I was the same man I had always been. The devoted husband. The fool. But behind the mask, a plan was forming. That afternoon, after she left for work, I sat in my office, my fingers drumming against the desk. This wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't just about her lying to me. It was about what I had built, our life, our home, the years I had poured into a marriage she had discarded like it was nothing. I wouldn't lash out. I wouldn't yell, break things, or beg for answers. That wasn't who I was. Instead, I would do what I did best. I would strategize. I needed information. Proof. Not just of the affair, but of everything. Emily had always handled certain financial matters, had access to joint accounts, investments. If she had been lying about one thing, what else had she been hiding? Pulling out my phone, I made a call. Veronica Reyes speaking. A crisp, professional voice answered on the other end. "Ms. Reyes, my name is Ethan Cole. I need your services." There was a pause. "What kind of services?" I leaned back, my voice steady. "Surveillance. Evidence collection. My wife is having an affair. I need to know everything." She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She simply requested details: the location of Emily's trip, the name of the man she was involved with, their usual patterns. I gave her everything I had. "This type of operation isn't cheap," she warned. "Money isn't an issue," I replied. "I want everything. Photos, videos, audio if possible. Leave no stone unturned." A beat of silence. "Then, understood, Mr. Cole. You'll have your first update within 48 hours. Ending the call, I exhaled slowly, feeling the first wave of control settle over me. This wasn't just about catching her in the act. This was about setting the stage for what came next. I opened my laptop, pulling up our financial records. Emily had always been good with numbers, always insisted she handle the bills, the taxes, the long-term investments. I had trusted her completely. But now, as I combed through account statements, I began to see the discrepancies. Unauthorized withdrawals. transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars unaccounted for over the past several months. So, she wasn't just betraying me in bed, she was stealing from me, too. That was when my plan truly took shape. This wouldn't just be about exposing her affair. This wouldn't just be about confronting her and walking away. No, that would be too easy for her. She had taken my trust, my loyalty, my years of dedication and thrown them away. I was going to take everything from her in return. And by the time she realized what was happening, it would be far too late. The week passed in a haze of routine, though nothing about my life was routine anymore. I moved through the days methodically, keeping my expressions neutral, my voice steady. Emily suspected nothing. She carried on as if nothing had changed, smiling, texting, preparing for her upcoming business trip while I quietly laid the groundwork to dismantle everything she had built on lies. By the third day, the first batch of evidence arrived. Veronica Reyes was thorough. High-resolution photos captured every moment of Emily's betrayal. She and Ryan were careless, openly affectionate in public. Their hands found each other effortlessly, his touch lingering on her waist, their lips meeting outside a hotel entrance. There were dinner dates, mornings spent on the balcony of a private suite, quiet laughter exchanged over drinks by the pool. Along with the photos came audio recordings. Their conversations dripped with deception. Emily spoke about me with indifference, describing our marriage as an obligation she had long since stopped valuing. She called me predictable, dull, a man too wrapped up in his career to notice what was happening right in front of him. She gushed about Ryan, how exciting he was, how different he made her feel. I listened to the recordings in silence, absorbing every word without reaction. The initial shock of discovering the affair had been replaced by something sharper, something colder. Anger had burned through the grief, leaving only a single, unshakable focus, ensuring she paid for what she had done. The next phase of my plan required precision. I met with my attorney, laying out the evidence, reviewing every legal option available. Emily had been reckless not just in her affair, but in her financial dealings as well. Quietly, she had funneled money from our joint accounts, small withdrawals at first, but over time, the pattern became obvious. She had been funding parts of her new life with Ryan, using the money I worked for to finance her deception. With every document and transaction I uncovered, my course of action became clearer. I began making financial adjustments, shifting assets, closing shared accounts, ensuring that by the time she realized what was happening, she would already be powerless. Emily returned from her trip in high spirits, her demeanor light and relaxed. The way she moved around the house, unpacking her bags, humming to herself, was sickening. She had spent the last week lying to my face, tangled up with another man, and yet she acted as though nothing had changed. At dinner, she recounted fabricated stories of team-building exercises and corporate strategy meetings. The ease with which she wove her lies was almost impressive. She laughed at small details, smiled warmly, reached for my hand across the table like she had done 1,000 times before. It was a performance, one I let play out uninterrupted. I asked questions, nodded at the right moments, let her believe I was still the trusting husband she thought she had fooled. The following morning, I finalized everything. My attorney secured legal action that would ensure Emily had no claim to anything she hadn't earned herself. The house, still in my name, would no longer be a place she had any right to stay. My accounts, once accessible to her, had been locked. The gift I had once eagerly planned to give her, the antique watch I had chosen so carefully, was shoved into the back of a drawer, now nothing more than a painful reminder of what I had lost. That evening, I placed a thick envelope on the coffee table and waited. Emily entered the room, pausing when she saw it, her expression shifting from curiosity to unease. She hesitated before picking it up, flipping open the top, her fingers trembling as she pulled out the first photo. One by one, she sifted through the evidence. The glossy prints of her with Ryan, the records of financial transactions she couldn't explain, the transcripts of her own words, spoken with such carelessness. The color drained from her face as realization sank in. She looked at me, searching for something, sympathy, understanding, a chance to explain, but I gave her nothing. There was nothing left to say. As she reached for words, her voice faltering, I simply stood and left the room. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't need her apologies. The choice had already been made, and by the time the sun rose, she would no longer be a part of my life. The house was silent when morning came. I woke early, my mind already set on what needed to be done. Emily's presence still lingered in the space, her clothes in the closet, her perfume faint in the air, but by the end of the day, all traces of her would be gone. I had spent the night in the office, listening as she moved through the house, pacing, whispering frantic phone calls behind closed doors. She hadn't approached me. She knew there was nothing she could say to undo what had already been set in motion. By noon, she had packed her bags, her departure as unceremonious as her betrayal had been. No tears, no final words. Just the quiet closing of the door, followed by an absence that should have felt like loss but instead brought nothing but relief. With Emily gone, my focus shifted to the next step. Her affair wasn't just personal, it had consequences that extended far beyond our marriage. Ryan had been reckless, allowing his relationship with my wife to spill into his professional life. And that was a mistake I intended to make sure he paid for. The financial discrepancies I had uncovered weren't limited to Emily's misuse of funds. Digging deeper into transactions tied to Ryan's company, I found patterns that suggested more than just personal indulgence. Unexplained withdrawals, hidden accounts, misallocated resources. He had been skimming from the business, leveraging corporate deals for personal gain. Armed with the evidence, I made my next move. I sent an anonymous package to Ryan's company board, including financial records, detailed reports, and surveillance images that painted an undeniable picture of corruption. The weight of the accusations would be impossible to ignore. The fallout was immediate. Within days, whispers of an internal investigation turned into public scandal. Ryan was pulled into emergency meetings, scrambling to contain the damage, but the evidence was airtight. His colleagues distanced themselves, shareholders demanded accountability, and soon, his position at the company was hanging by a thread. I followed the developments closely, watching as the life he had built began to crumble. The man who had so confidently pursued my wife, who had flaunted his betrayal without a second thought, was now drowning in consequences of his own making. Meanwhile, Emily wasn't faring much better. With access to our financial resources cut off, she was forced to face the reality of her choices. The comfortable life she had taken for granted was slipping away. Her texts to me shifted from anger to desperation, each one going unanswered. She had underestimated me. They both had. One evening, as I sat in my now empty home, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. Months ago, I had been a man who believed in loyalty, in trust, in the foundation of a marriage built on years of love and commitment. That man no longer existed. Now, I was something else. Someone sharper, more calculated. Someone who understood that betrayal didn't just deserve justice, it demanded it. And I wasn't done yet. Days turned into weeks, and the aftermath of my plan unfolded like a well-executed strategy. Ryan's professional downfall was swift and absolute. His company released a statement announcing his immediate resignation amid an ongoing internal review. The media latched onto the scandal, speculating on the financial misconduct, the affair, and the collapse of his once promising career. His name, once associated with success, now carried the stain of disgrace. Emily wasn't spared from the wreckage. Without access to our shared assets, she found herself struggling in ways she had never imagined. She had always lived comfortably, relying on my financial stability while chasing the excitement she claimed I lacked. But now, that safety net was gone. The apartment she had hastily moved into was far from the luxury she was used to. The lifestyle she had once taken for granted was slipping from her grasp. Her attempts to contact me became more frequent. First, there were angry outbursts, accusations that I had overreacted, that I had ruined her life out of spite. Then, the messages softened, filled with regret, apologies, and pleas for another chance. She wanted to talk, to explain, to fix what she had broken. I ignored them all. One evening, a final message arrived. Short. Desperate. She wanted to meet in person, claiming she had something important to tell me. For a moment, I considered deleting it like all the others. But curiosity won. We met at a quiet cafe, one we had visited together countless times, back when we were still us. She looked different now. The confidence she had once worn so effortlessly was gone, replaced by uncertainty. Her clothes were less polished, her posture less assured. She had lost weight, and the dark circles beneath her eyes hinted at sleepless nights. She started with an apology, her voice quiet, her words carefully chosen. She admitted she had made a mistake, that she had been blinded by something she thought was love but now saw for what it truly was, a fleeting illusion. Then came the real reason she had asked to meet. She was pregnant. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to shock. The revelation hit harder than anything I had anticipated. My mind immediately calculated the timeline, the possibility that the child could be mine. She swore it was. But her word meant nothing now. She spoke about the future, about wanting to make things right, about co-parenting, about the life we could still build for our child. She was grasping at something that no longer existed, hoping I would reach back. I didn't. I told her I would handle the situation in the only way that made sense, through legal action. I would ensure the child, if it was mine, had everything it needed. But as for her, there was no future left to salvage. She broke down then, pleading, insisting that this changed everything. But it didn't. The damage was irreversible. I left her there, sitting alone at the table where we had once shared quiet mornings and soft laughter. The next day, I met with my attorney. A paternity test would be arranged as soon as possible. If the child was mine, I would fight for full custody. If it wasn't, Emily would become nothing more than a chapter 1 had closed. Standing in my apartment that night, overlooking the city skyline, I realized how much I had changed. The man who had once rushed home with an anniversary gift in his pocket was gone. And I didn't mourn him. Betrayal had shaped me into something stronger, something sharper. I had taken control of my life, stripped away the illusions, and emerged on the other side unscathed. Emily and Ryan had played their game, believing they had won. But in the end, I had rewritten the rules. And I had made sure they lost everything.